While the old adage is largely true, it's not the size of the sensor that matters, it's how you use it. There are some definite real advantages to having a physically large sensor in the camera of your smartphone. Today, in this video, we're going to look at a tweet from Ice Universe, renowned tech leaker on the internet, where they posted some supposed sensor resolutions and sizes for some upcoming devices, and there are some notable surprises on there for me. Let's jump over to that tweet now. We'll look at the numbers, and then we'll talk about potentially what it means. G, I'm going to assume, is Google. 50 megapixel, 1/1.12 inch sensor. That is very large. We're going to double back to that because that's actually larger than what we have now on the Pixel 7 and 7 Pro. A, probably Apple iPhone, 48 megapixel, 1/1.14 inch sensor. So that's also very, very large. X is probably Xiaomi, 50 megapixel, 1 inch sensor. O is going to be Oppo, 50 megapixel, 1 inch sensor. V is Vivo, 50 megapixel, 1 inch sensor. They are all using the same sensor and getting very, very impressive results. We'll look at a few of here in a moment. And then S, Samsung, 200 megapixel, 1/1.3 inch sensor. Crazy high resolution in the S23 Ultra and presumably in the S24 Ultra as well, but not all that physically large of a sensor. All right, so let's start here with Google. Okay, 50 megapixel, 1/1.2 inch sensor. So with the Pixel 7 Pro here via GSM Arena, we are currently using a 50 megapixel sensor, the same, but it only measures 1/1.31 inches. That is a smaller sensor. For you, those that don't know, when you see the 1 over something, it is smaller than a 1 inch sensor. A 1 inch sensor is not actually 1 inch across. That measurement is actually referring to the size of the hypothetical tube you would need on ye olden camera for a sensor the size we're looking at. Very confusing, very strange, but at any rate, these are smaller than a 1 inch sensor. Obviously, these are 1 inch sensors. So, Pixel 7 Pro, again, very similar specs. What we can see here, 50 megapixels, but it is slightly larger, physically larger than what we currently have. And he actually responded to somebody down here and gave some details. No, I take that back. It was actually in a separate tweet. Pixel 8 Pro may also use Samsung GN2. 1/1.12 inches. So what we have here on the Pixel 7 Pro is the Samsung GN1 camera sensor, and he's stating he has heard they may be going to the GN2, which would explain this increase in size. Not a huge increase, mind you, but it is, I would say, fairly substantial. Okay, well, what does that mean? What do you get with a physically larger sensor size? Well, there's a few things that are going to come along with that. For one, it's physically larger, so we can take in more light. So you tend to get better low light performance. And since they're gathering more light, you can actually lower the shutter speed, which means you can take pictures more quickly and with less blur when you're doing that. Another advantage, which I actually mentioned in an older video, and some people got very mad at me for saying this, is that larger sensors do tend to have stronger bokeh or blur in the background behind the subject which is in focus. A lot of people got mad at me, like I said, and said, no, Shane, that's the aperture. And yes, the aperture does obviously affect your bokeh. However, if you take a very, very small camera sensor, your aperture is not, you can't open the aperture so much that you're going to get a blurred background. I will literally link in the description to an article from DP Review where they break this down with some very extensive math. And trust me, larger sensors do get more bokeh. They just do. Continuing to move down the list here, Apple with the next iPhone, he says directly down here, the iPhone 15 Pro Max will be going up to a larger sensor, 1/1.14 inches. I think the 14 Pro Max I've got pulled up here was 1/1.28. So Apple's going towards a bigger sensor for these reasons we just discussed with Google and potentially the Pixel 8 Pro. Other publications, mind you, like Sam Mobile, have actually picked up this tidbit here and have talked about the Pixel 8 Pro using the GN2, a larger physical sensor for those prior mentioned advantages. Now, the Oppo, the Vivo, the Xiaomi, all already using a 1-inch sensor. And if we jump over to Ben here on Twitter, he has a ton of samples all the time from these phones that look incredible. Here's the Oppo Find X6 Pro, and this is not portrait mode. This is what you get with a 1-inch sensor. You get this incredible bokeh, this incredibly narrow band of focus, right? Like we're in focus right here, and that's about it. As it gets any further back, I guess I should be doing this way. We're in focus right here. This is out of focus, right? Right here. This is in focus. Everything else is out of focus. It's very narrow band of focus. That's what you get with these 1-inch sensors, and that's what you get on these Vivo, Oppo, and Xiaomi phones. They're all using the same sensor, and they take incredible photos. Unfortunately, for those of us that live stateside and don't import our phones, Apple and Google are not quite going all the way to a full 1-inch sensor, but it is good to see them taking that step further. Of course, Samsung kind of off in La La Land doing their own thing with this insane resolution and only using a 1/1.3-inch sensor. But what they're doing is they're packing so many pixels into such a small space that when they're bending down from 200, they're winding up with pixels that are virtual pixels, super pixels, bend pixels that are as massive as anyone out there, but they don't quite perform as well as truly physically large sensors like you get, or physically large pixels like you get on these very physically large sensors. They're kind of taking their own approach on this one, and it's working relatively well. But as you can see, these other companies are all moving towards these larger sensors, and there are great reasons for that. As I'm not a big iPhone person, I don't have much to say there, but what I will say is that if Ice Universe is correct, and we're going to get the GN2 on the Pixel 8 Pro, I do think that might be a fairly significant improvement to what is already one of the best cameras you can buy, in particular here in America. Very few people would argue that Google doesn't have the best processing on their camera, their photos already. They do a lot really, really well. Adding that larger and larger sensor, as long as their software can keep up with it, I think is only going to be better and better for all of us to use. Guys, thanks for watching this quick breakdown of this tweet, some things that may be coming down the pipeline very, very soon. I will see you on the next video, and until next time, stay nerdy, my friends.